Excellent. I think we are on the go. Okay, so when we think of jazz and when we think of innovation, I'm throwing out the term radical change. And I'm throwing out the term radical change because a lot of times, be it in our work environment, if it's in the educational arena, if it is in any type of industry, when we need to make a change these days, it is not a small little tweak, but it's a huge radical change. A radical change is to change your way of doing something, moving from where we are, going into a new way of doing things, a very different way of doing things, and maybe in an unusual way than what we had been doing it before. I'm going to play this video and tell me if you can't hear it, but when we think of the Apple iPhone and when we think of when Apple first introduced the iPhone, some amazing things happened. The Apple iPhone, well before the unit hit the street, Apple had back orders on the item. Apple announced that it sold over 5 million of the iPhones just in 3 days. 3 days of announcing the launch, which was on September 21st. And the revenue from the iPhone rose 56%. During that short period of time as the sales were booming for the Apple iPhone, making it go up to 48% of the company's total revenue. That's outstanding. That is outstanding. When Apple moved to the iPhone 5, and now we know they're even on a future version of the 5 right now, the 5C, they were thinking of what is it that we may want? What is it that will capture the eye of individuals, capture the ear of those who need to listen and use the iPhone for all the different ways and functions that we do? The other thing that Apple had, though, was their brand and their branding. And they knew they could rely on that branding when they introduced this new product. But talking about branding, every time when someone comes out with a new initiative or new direction, it's not always something or some person where we can rely on knowing them from the past. Introducing Gangnam Style. How many people are familiar with this young man? Unmute those mics.
I'm not familiar with it.
Wow. Okay, Dr. Swanson?
There you go. Oh, I'm familiar with him.
How could anyone not be? Okay, this young man, Southern Caribbean musician, introduced himself by simply creating a video and posting it on YouTube. It started in Korea, but now because we can post videos and make them viral, the term we love today, he posted it on YouTube. Immediately, he had tons of viewers watching his video. Today, this individual, because of his little dance that I'm going to show you, and the nice beat to the music, is one of the most popular individuals who was not known previous to introducing his video, but is very well known today. Listen up. this. Now, this may not be a dance that you or I will do in our rooms, even by ourselves at night, but I will tell you the dance that he did made him very, very popular. On July 15th is when his video hit the YouTube, and it received 500,000 views on the very, very first day. And what he did was use the access that he had to YouTube to promote himself, to promote the dance moves as well. And by the way, I was watching television just yesterday. While I said he is all over with his Gangnam Style dance, just that little short dance that we saw, he was doing pistachio commercials. Go figure. Pistachio has actually hired him to do commercials for their nuts. And so he dances on the commercial, and Pistachio, the takeaway says, a different way to crack your nuts. He is very popular. He is on the run. So when we think of innovative ways and stepping outside of the box, we have examples all over the place as far as how individuals, universities, organizations have stepped outside of the box. MOOCs is another one. And I won't show the video on that. We all know what these are as far as the online courses. When MOOCs first came out, it was a question, would they be successful? And I think some organizations who initially started them stepped away from them. But right now, a lot of universities and colleges are re-looking at the possibility of incorporating these into their infrastructure. A new way, a new style of doing things. Jazzing up the environment is all over, is all around us, and definitely in the educational area. So what do these innovative ideas have to do with jazz? What do they have to do with music at all? We're going to consider a concept today that actually looks at the structure of jazz. It looks at how even individuals applied the structure of jazz into their environments to make a radical change. And we're going to talk about how you and I can apply the very same thing in our own environments as far as using the structure of jazz. When we think of jazz improvisation, what is it? It's that process of being spontaneous, being fresh, coming up with new melodies. You start off with a basic melody, but then you venture off into new things, into new ideas. Eventually, you'll come back and repeat that basic rhythm that was set in the first place. But the key component of jazz improvisation is musicians are allowed to be creative. They're allowed to try it. They're allowed to step out of the box and try something different. And they're backed up by the other musicians who are there. They started with them playing the basic rhythm, but they allow the musicians to venture out, do their own thing, so to say, come up with those new creative ideas, and then the team works together to pull it all back together. So what has this to do when we do think about applying some of the things that these musicians have worked over all the years into our work environments or into our home environments or wherever, when we know we want to make a radical change? Duke Ellington said, you've got to find some way of saying it without saying it. If you say it without saying it, you have to be in an environment where people are willing to accept those ideas when they start flowing. Wynton Marsalis says, there is no right or wrong, just some choices. Some are better than others. And wouldn't that be wonderful if, as we are in those creative sessions and we're asking individuals to come up with ideas, everyone knows, not just by what we say, but by actions of what we do, there's no right or wrong answer. We're asking you to come up with new ideas. Go ahead and throw them out. Be free to throw them out. And that is what Wynton Marsalis said. Creativity is the most important ingredient of improvisation. The first step is actually developing and expressing that creativity. And as I said before, those who are there in the mix are very willing and open to that inspiration to flow. This is what we want to bring into those sessions when we are trying to come up with new strategic directions in our business environment, try to come up with new directions. Actually, today, Dr. Swanson and I met with our new provost for our online college, and one of the strategies or one of the priorities that she said that she knows she is stepping into is working with the college to brand out who we are, to identify who we are, and to be creative in doing that and using technology, because technology is the basis of our online education offering that we have to our students. But in order for that to work, we have to have a creative environment where individuals feel free to express and free to improvise. So, improvised melody occurs when musicians use slurs, alternate notes, syncopation, in order to recreate the melody in a new and interesting way. So let's think about our creative teams that we work with. Do we allow them to, in a business way or in a way that matches your particular industry, do we allow them to use those slurs, those alternate notes? Allow them to use syncopation, meaning come up with an idea and then do a different method or way of getting it in there. It doesn't all have to start and stop at the same point. In fact, I can start an idea and you can complete it for me if we are working together as a creative team, just like the musicians do. So jazz improvisation is based on a form of structure. Jazz actually has a structure to it. And by the way, you're hearing this from someone who, I started in music when I was very young. I started with piano lessons. I learned in classical music, and as I shared with Dr. Dakin previously, I've been singing ever since. I don't play the piano as much anymore, but I've been involved in music for just a little bit. I was one who did not like jazz for several years of my life. In fact, I didn't like it until I became a young adult. And I didn't like it because I think the way and method I learned music was very structured, very rhythmic, very structured. And then when I heard jazz, I didn't understand the structure of jazz. This is the structure that we see right now. Jazz starts off with a phrase. And with the phrase, this can be compared to, say if we're writing, it's a sentence in a writing. It's a simple expression that one musical idea puts out there. If you're in a creative team, it's when the groundwork is laid. This is where we're starting, and this is where we need to go. We need to come up with new and different ways to get from point A to point B, C, D, or wherever we want to go. But we start with a basic phrase. So someone comes up with an idea. Can we start in this direction? And then jazz goes into the paragraph or the stanza. And that is where there's repetition. That's where there's a variation of what was originally put out there with the rhythm of a statement when others pick it up and restate it in different ways. And isn't that very close to how it works when we are working in a creative team in those creative sessions? I come up with an idea. Other people maybe add to the idea, build on it. Remember, as Wynton Marsalis says, there's no wrong or right answer. So individuals are free to add to whatever was first started as far as the idea. So when all of the adding is going on, and when you take what I said and then you add your own flavor to it, and then someone else does the same thing, that phrase is called the stanza or the paragraph. And we're going to listen to all of this as we listen to a jazz piece. And then the solo, that's the third portion of the jazz piece of music. And this is when an individual takes what was stated originally as the phrase and what others had stated as they were throwing out those ideas, and then goes off into their own version of it. It's called improvisation. That person is telling a story. That person has taken in everything. They have listened to all the ideas that were shared out there, and now they are interpreting those ideas and providing out to the team that new thought, a new way of looking at it. And so just imagine again when you're in your creative sessions and when the idea has been thrown out there, individuals have thrown in, but how about this, how about that, the stanza part, and then someone is bold enough to stand up and say, I've heard everything that was said, what do you think about this? And they tell more of that full story using their own language, using their own words, improvisation. That's what happens in jazz. And then after the solo or solos take place, because when the jazz piece is flowing, I go off into my improvising story. You can do the same thing. In jazz, another person comes up and does the same thing as well. And then it all comes back together when the group, nodding heads, if we're in that creative session, if we're playing the jazz piece, from a musical standpoint, when the musicians go back to that main initial phrase or stanza that was stated in the first place. That is the structure of jazz. And those very same components are components that can be added into a creative innovation session that we may take place in our work environments. And so we're going to listen to a little jazz piece, if that's okay with everybody. And we're not going to listen to the whole thing, but we're going to listen close enough and long enough where I'm going to ask you, and hopefully I have the volume down enough where you can go ahead and let us know, speak into your microphones. I'm going to ask you, when is the phrase part? When is the stanza part? When is the solo part? And then when does the group come back together with the phrase? Are you guys good with that? Are your mics unmuted? Okay, we're going to go on. I'm not hearing back from you, so, but we are going to, was that someone? Okay. This is Cantaloupe Island, and this is performed by Herbie Hancock. And again, I'm going to start this, but ask you to listen to those different parts of jazz. The phrase, the stanza, the solo, and then coming back to the phrase. That's the phrase right there. They stated this is the purpose of this song. At this point, the piano, the other instruments are adding in to the next part, the stanza. Repeating the phrase. And this begins the solo. He's expressing himself, expressing the solo, using his own improvisation. And he goes into a lot of variations with the solo. I'm going to fast forward this. And the solo has transferred off to another person in the team. He just finished giving his version of it as well. And as we flow through the whole song of Cantaloupe Island, Herbie Hancock picks up his portion, his interpretation of it as well. Again, relate this to the creative teams that we all work on. A creative session. We're throwing out our ideas. What about this? What about that? How do you think this will work? And then as any jazz song goes, just going to the very end, the whole team comes back to playing the stanza that was stated up front. And so that's how jazz works. That's the structure of jazz. And that's how improvisation works amongst the team. Starts off with the stated stanza, goes into the paragraphs where everyone is adding into it. What about this? Can we add on? Can we add on? And then someone takes off in a solo where they are actually identifying, I've listened to everything that has happened, and here's how I think it can work. Someone else says, yeah, and how about this? Improvisation. And then the whole team comes back together at the end, repeating what we came here for, the stanza. This very same structure can be added into our sessions when we're working with our teams in a creative session. When I do the workshop, I actually go into a video where I talk about Miles Davis and what Miles Davis had to do as an individual to improvise, to change his way, his direction of being the musician that he was, because he realized around the late 60s that other groups that had more of a funk rhythm to it, funk rhythm and beat to it, were becoming more popular. And while he had been very popular previously, he was noticing that he was beginning to get moved down the chart. And so he went through a thought process that he did individually that actually incorporated these three basic steps as far as how to jazz up and how to innovate where you are. Step number one, and then I go back to Miles Davis with how he did it. Create a clear guiding structure. We saw in the jazz example, that's what the musicians did. In Cantaloupe Island, they stated that structure. Step number two, establish a creative chaos environment that allows people to trigger those new ideas, those accidental discoveries. You embellish the environment and let everyone know that it is okay. It is okay to come up with those different thoughts, those different ways of putting those ideas on the table. And then step number three, encourage improvisation. The structure of jazz is made up of chords and rhythms in the jazz environment. Just like what we saw and heard the musicians do is what you want to encourage your team to do, improvise. But you do that after, of course, you complete your steps 1, 2, where you allow the team to be open with those discoveries and to be very innovative in the ideas that they're throwing out there. We just walked through again the example of the music Cantaloupe Island. Just to give you a little story about Miles Davis and what he did and how he actually stepped through these environments. Miles Davis, as I mentioned, was a very, very popular musician, and then he found out that there was a new wave of music that was capturing the ear of individuals, and he was being moved to the side of it. Instead of being the musician who was ready to hang up his instruments and say, well, I guess my music is just not needed anymore, that's not what Miles Davis did. Miles Davis said, what is it going to take? And how can I move me and my group of musicians into that same area, that same arena where everyone else is enjoying the new wave of music. How can I step outside of the box? Well, Miles Davis went through each one of these steps as far as coming up with an innovative idea, creating that guiding structure, allowing that environment of chaos, encouraging improvisation, and realizing the risk, but also applauding the successes. And when Miles did that, this is where when I'm doing a workshop, I usually will show the video. He ended up creating a new form of jazz, which we know today as jazz fusion. It's also called jazz rock. And what it was, he took that funk and the R&B rhythms that he was hearing from these other groups, and he combined it into jazz to create a new form of jazz, which is called jazz fusion. And so Miles, when you think of Miles, the older Miles, or the Miles when he first started off on his jazz walk, the pictures that we're showing were pictures from recordings that he did during that time. But then as he allowed himself to work with his team of musicians and step outside of that jazz box, pick up those rock rhythms and use the electric guitar as well in the songs that he created at that time, he went on to be known today as the father of jazz fusion. Now, when you make a radical change like Miles Davis did, you have to have that look that goes along with it. And so the pictures that you're seeing today or right now are the pictures of Miles after his radical change, as he moved from the original Miles Davis to the Miles Davis who was in front of jazz fusion. I actually have a version of the very same song. We're just going to listen to a little part of it, but I want you to hear just how he stepped from the basic form of jazz. He allowed that improvisation to work. He kept the same structure of jazz, but added in the electric guitar, added in a different rhythm as well to the music that was being played. This is the very same song performed by Herbie Hancock, but you're going to hear how jazz fusion was introduced. More funky beats, funky rhythm, and the electric guitar. This is the structure that Miles Davis is known as the father of. This is the form of music that he was behind transforming, that now caught the ear of the young individuals and those who were listening to music with more of an upbeat at that time. That is jazz fusion. And so Herbie Hancock is known today for being able to successfully change the direction of jazz into what it is today. And so when we think of our creative environment, and when we think of how do we apply this inside of our developmental teams to ignite that essence of the environment where you feel comfortable in improvising, it's quite okay to say, listen to this jazz song first. There's nothing wrong with that. You'd be very out of the box, I think, by doing that. But be sure, if you're going to apply this with your team, you let them know what those different levels of improvisation are and how the jazz songs are structured, and how, as we work through the creative sessions that we're going to work with, how we're going to apply those very same structures into what we're doing. In order to work, in order for this to be successful, on this slide it tells us you have to be responsive to change, but selective in accepting requests for change. Every idea that is thrown out, just may not fit into the strategic direction of what you're trying to reach for inside of your business. It is okay to identify that to the team, usually upfront, level setting and letting the team know exactly the direction that you want to go is how you level set. But you do need to interject throughout the process and be sure that the team is moving together. Just like the musicians, as individuals were throwing out ideas, they stayed within the same theme of what was introduced. And then as they even did their solos, they stayed within the same theme. And then, of course, the team came together at the end. The next point, seek new knowledge about innovation, including reinventing the innovation process itself. What's wrong with even changing how we look at new ways of doing things? We don't always have to go into a room with a whiteboard. We can have individuals to call in, dial in from home. We can have individuals to bring in examples, be it videos, be it music, be it anything. YouTube is so popular today, and ideas fly left and right on YouTube in almost any industry. We can allow the innovative process itself to be changed and feel comfortable with that. And then the final point here, document innovation explicitly via maps and charts and communicate it implicitly by words and practice. Write down, this is our process of what we're going to do. Allow the process to be creative, but give the initial structure into what you're doing as you're working with your team. And so as we look at different businesses who have done exactly this, they have applied the innovation, they have applied improvisation, and they've allowed it to work freely in their environment. So let's just look at a few. Aetna Insurance. Aetna Insurance brought in a jazz bassist, Michael Gold, and his ensemble to teach improvisation. They actually brought in the musicians to teach their individuals how to improvise. Sometimes we think we know how to do it, but it helps a lot. We are visual individuals. We like hearing things. We like touching and feeling as well. Why not give your groups a different method of learning how to incorporate a process? Aetna did it by bringing in the musicians, and the theory was trying to move the group to a reactive thinking position. And they were trying to come up with new competitive ideas and directions where they wanted the group to help to set the environment, set the atmosphere. And they did it very successfully. Enterprise Rent-A-Car. They used improvisation by being one of the first, actually the first rent-a-car agency to go to where the customers were. And if you guys remember from years ago, when you wanted to rent a car, you had to go to the airport. Well, what Enterprise did is realize all of our customers who want to rent cars are not leaving, going on a trip, or flying into a location and wanting to pick up a car there. Yes, that is a large market of those who rent cars, but that was not the total market that Enterprise saw. If they could be innovative and how they took these services out to the people, they could enhance their market. Hence today, we have the whole environment, the whole industry of rental cars where there are local rental car locations in several neighborhoods, not just in the airports. Enterprise stepped outside of the box when they thought about that. And then Apple Computer, we already talked about the introduction of the iPhone, the iPad, and as Apple even launched the iPad, they were stepping outside of the box. They were providing to the market something that was new, something that was creative. Now I will say, and fast forward to today and current, Apple has a lot of competition, and we know it. Samsung, we can name them. Even those who have tried startups and were not as successful as they thought, but they still got their products out there, like Barnes & Noble and the Nook. But when Apple originally did it, they allowed that improvisation to flow, which they do very well in their environment, so that coming up with those new innovative ideas and directions was a part of what we do. And history is what we see with Apple today. When you are in that innovative position as a leader and you are leading your team through improvisation, it's wise for you to know what your leadership style is and what the impact of your leadership style has on your team. An inspirational leader will focus on the opportunities, not looking at what doesn't work, but looking at what could work. Not that it worked yesterday, but we could look at it, we could try it. They create a trusting environment and let individuals know that it is okay to throw out those ideas. And it also is okay not just to hit on a small tweak or a small change, but to focus on those radical big changes. And it's okay if someone questions what I say as a leader. Questioning means you're thinking. And you're thinking of, I'm hearing what you're saying, and I am understanding where you're coming from, but can I ask you a question that can maybe even help us increase our way of thinking, maybe even redirect us into a better direction of getting to where we want to go? Know your leadership style. In the workshop, I actually take a pause and I ask individuals, now you are released to go and be innovative. And we go into an actual exercise where I'm asking individuals to write on the spot, think of something, an idea that you have had in your mind but have not fully implemented, and we're going to work it. Miraculously, during a workshop environment, even though the shock of, oh no, I got to think of something new right now, people work through that. Repeatedly, as I've done this workshop, individuals do step forward, throw out the idea, and then as a team, as a whole group, we work it and we massage it. Throw away the box. Reverse engineer the syllabus. For those in the educational environment, when we're looking right now in our environment, and probably yours, Dr. Denkin, as well, we work on program reviews. We're looking at the programs. How well are those courses structured? How well are the students adhering to those learning objectives that were identified for the students to pick up, to absorb? How well is the total teaching environment going for us in the program? One way of looking at it is starting right where that program is, and then looking where can we go from here. Another way of looking at it is, what is our goal? What is our goal as far as the program to the students in the first place? I'm working on a program review right now for our Information Systems degree program, and when our executive dean spoke with me months ago, he told me, Karen, when you start on this program review, don't look at what we have and just look at corrections. Focus on the end when you start. And what he meant by that is be willing to reverse engineer. If that is going to get us to a new way, a new method of the end, and that is preparing our students to be successful in the information systems industry. Consult with peers. Sometimes when you're going through the innovative process, your group, your internal group, may not have all of the wisdom to successfully move from point A to a totally different zone as far as where you want to go. And it is quite okay to bring in consultants during that time who can either help you to work through the process, the innovative process, those who are experts in working through the innovative process, or consultants who can interject new ideas as the team comes up with various subjects. Consult with peers as you need to. Consult with students. For those of us in the educational world, we should not be working on any program reviews where we as instructors or professors are looking at the content of what we're providing to students without asking the students and hearing from the students themselves. What do you think about the courses? What do you think about the program? For those graduating alumni, how much of the program that you received when you were going through the training have you been able to apply on the job? Listen to your stakeholders. In the educational arena, listen to your students. Do it, do it, do it. A lot of times when we're working on a new direction, we're hindered from doing it because it's different. But all it takes is for one of us or some of us to give that little push to get us rolling. And once we're rolling, we realize it's okay, it's all right to step outside of the box. It's okay to hear of ideas that are different than what we were working on before. Right now, I'm in front of a research initiative where I'm working with a school here. Eastern Fayola is the name of the academy based here in Colorado, and a school that's based in Uganda. And it's made Numba College in Uganda. And we're bringing the students together for a collaborative leadership development environment. Now, both schools on their own were very hindered from even reaching out and establishing an international cultural collaborative exchange before, because it was different. But as I'm coming on board and working with them on presenting a model that can be used to assist both sides to step outside of that box, to reach out and know that the global world, if we're developing our students to be successful in it, we have to grab it now when they're young and introduce it to them now as they're young. What I can tell you is, as I'm working with these teachers to set up the lesson plans, the infrastructure for the students finally to get together, it is the students who are providing that energy. The students are very energized about the possibility of working with students in another country. They're not hindered at all. And so definitely go to your stakeholders, get their inputs, their insights, and they can be wonderful, wonderful fuel for whatever change or initiative you and your team are working on. Now it's your turn to go and innovate. We've heard examples with the musicians as they go through jazz and the different parts of jazz, the structure of jazz. We've seen how Miles Davis did it. We talked about it, how he went from a form of music in his industry that was once top of the charts, then it began to fall, but he didn't stop there. He re-innovated himself and his musicians by bringing in the type of music that was popular, the R&B, the funk music, creating a new innovative direction of music, jazz fusion. And we talked about the steps that are important to go through for us as we in our work environments are being creative and coming up and working with our teams on a structure to be creative. Now is your time to do it. Be creative, be innovative, let that improvisation flow throughout your team, but you're going to need to be the catalyst because you're going to need to introduce to the team the method and the rhythm. You could do like Edna and bring in a musical group so the team can hear the structure of jazz and then see it performed as well. But you will need to be that catalyst. My question for you is, are you ready? That's the presentation. I'd like to hear your input.
Wow. You get me every time that I've heard this. And I don't want to hog this, but I'm thinking of the conference that's coming up in April. And I was riding home with Dr. Beach. He's our associate dean. And Glenn, perhaps you'll meet him tomorrow, if not on Monday. But I said to him, and this is thinking outside the box, I said, if once we get the conference outlined, what we're doing, and let me just say, my idea for this conference is to have a social event beforehand. That's not really innovative. The conference day, but on the last day, an optional leadership event. And not that I could do this, but maybe I could. But I thought, why don't we invite our executive dean to the Colorado Distance Learning Association? Even at the conference, even just to be a participant And I think for him to play a different role, I mean, that would be an innovative idea. And, you know, I know money's tight, but I think that I felt a different rhythm coming down the light rail when I thought of that. And then I thought, oh, wow, what about some of the other deans? You know, there's this box that we are a state chapter, but that doesn't mean that they can't attend. And that, you know, I was just thinking of that one idea. I could fill up the rest of the time with the ideas that I have for the conference. But what do you do when you don't have enough drummers and pianists and bassists and you know, that's sometimes the problem. You have to have enough people to bounce these ideas off of. I mean, didn't you run into that with your peer review?
Well, you know, I was sort of lucky with the team that I was working with because they were quite open. They're somewhat new to Ashford University, and so the ideas that they were willing to throw out into the program review, because see, we didn't start with just what we had in the program review. We started with, if we are hiring individuals in the IS industry, what are we looking for? So we started without even looking at the program review and then tackling it from there. But to your point, Dr. Swanson, once we added in our campus representative maybe sort of is what you're saying, she didn't want to play the musical instruments. And so to answer your question, what do you do if you don't have those musical players, if you don't have people coming with the openness to participate? Well, you know, like I mentioned, it's a couple of ways of doing it. You can invite individuals who are willing to come. They're not part of your direct team, but they're willing to come and throw out ideas into the team. They could be consultants. They could be just someone from a team who you know, maybe you've worked with. They could be in a different college as an example, but you know that they have stepped outside of the box. Invite them in to participate with you guys. Sometimes the catalyst can help the team to get that rhythm.
Yeah,
well, that's exactly. Oh, go ahead, Dr. Glenn.
One of the more appropriate things that I might add to this, as I sat here and listened for the last 45 minutes, and I want to focus on a couple of points. The first point I want to focus on is the aspect of what is contributed to innovation from a business point of view, from an educational point of view. Are either of you familiar with Dr. Ken Robinson?
No.
All right, Dr. Ken Robinson is an English, Sir Ken Robinson. He's from England. He lives in Los Angeles. He has done educational research. One of his educational research projects was about 18 years long. And what he did was measure the creativity index of our learners in this country from the age of 5 through the age of 18 or 19. What he discovered was shocking. What he discovered is that a child with an creative index of 98 to 100, by the time they get through our public education system, has a creative index of between 1 and 5. Why?
I've heard that.
Oh, yes. I just Googled him, and yes, I have heard him speak, yes.
Well, one of the reasons that happens in our educational system is because our instructors are not taught how to connect with the reality of the student. Too much of our educational philosophy is based on a mix of the traditional aspect and the educational reform aspects of accountability, most appropriately defined in No Child Left Behind. What you see is coming out of, and this is the second point, and we're cycling into this, what you see coming out of that is educators that really treat education as a job rather than a profession. And the reason I segue into that is to get to the second part of Dr. Karen's aspect on on curriculum evaluation, which is something I teach in the Masters of Education program. Many educators who have the title of doctor or PhD did their research for their doctorate, their degree, as a task-oriented process. Getting back into it, using it as a professional development, and what I'm talking about is action research, where they actually set up for their curriculum evaluation a complete action research that involves stakeholders, staff, teachers, curriculum designers, deans, librarians, the whole gamut of everyone who's involved in the active learning environment for a student-centered approach. Often, instructors who are vested in their autonomy, especially with the tenure track approach that many college professors have an autonomy about their educational practice. Getting them involved in a creative aspect of professional development where they actually develop and contribute to a whole listening audience something written from their point of view, not necessarily along the lines, not totally related to what you just did, Dr. Karen, but more totally focused on an aspect of something that relates directly to their educational practice in the classroom. Might be something like what I've written called learning structures. Might be something like writing called YAPA. Might be something associated with that. But the point being that the creative juices are stirred by that perspective. And when they're stirred by that perspective, you're talking about something that Stephen Covey talked about in his the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, which is called synergy. When you look at the aspect, synergy has to do with willingness, reflective viewpoints, and the creativity index of the individuals. Are they willing to contribute, or are they afraid to contribute because of being right or wrong? Just some thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. And Dr. Swanson, you're taking part in a program review as well. How's the flow of creative ideas there? Is the floor wide open, or did you feel even from Jumpstart
I have had very little interaction in that program review, and I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's telling me the time is up, that noise. But our time is up. I'm afraid it is going to shut down on us. But they were open to a point, but I really was not connected enough with the leader to really answer your question.
And that brings up the point to wrap up here. How many people look at curriculum review as a research project opportunity?
Versus a task that they have to do, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, versus just, how do I fix this program so it's better?
Right, exactly. Like I said, don't start, as my executive dean told me, he said, Karen, don't start at the program the way it is. Start with the end in mind.
Yeah,
and what
absolutely.
he meant was that is your open slate. Yep.
That's part of Stephen Covey's approach to synergy, keeping the end in mind. But at the same time, one of the other, I think, unfortunate ramifications of our educational system in this country is that we have people who are so result-oriented, they don't know they're result-oriented. In other words, they very rarely look at the process. The process is not how they think. The end result is how they think. And unfortunately, that's the definition of insanity, using the same process over and over and over again, trying to get the same result. I think we're going home. Are we gone?
Well, this is awesome. This is awesome discussion, Dr. Swanson. Maybe we'll have a chance to continue during lunchtime tomorrow.
I could talk about this stuff for hours, believe me.
Yes, this is wonderful. I think we may have lost Dr. Swanson just for a second. I'll just wrap up and just thank you everyone for attending. Remember to be that catalyst in your environment when you are working on change. We do need it for the reasons, as Dr. Dakin, you mentioned, the way we raise ourselves, the way we raise our children and structure them. By the time we're done with them in our educational system, we have told them enough of no, you can't do, you got to stay in the box, no, that's not the way it's supposed to be, that their creative juices are just crushed.
Right, exactly. Yep.
And so, but the only way that a change can happen in our industries, be it educational, corporate, wherever it is for individuals being willing to step up and lead and interject a method or a change to help individuals
quite frankly,
get outside of that box. And that's what everyone on this call wants to do.
That's what my writing is about. My writing, the title of my writing is called Effective Learning Structures, and it focuses on 4 aspects in learning. Okay, it focuses on the perspective of external, internal locus of control as related to extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. It focuses on the Pygmalion theory, how learning beliefs are built. It focuses on the aspect of instruction from a sage on a stage versus a guide on the side approach. And it focuses on the aspect of having educators understand the difference between training and education, because many of them don't.
I hate to interrupt, but I am going to have to bring this to a close. I'm having problems, so I will thank you for your participation, and thank you for this presentation, Dr. Ivy. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Excellent presentation.
Okay, thank you.